it's true. Something's missing. Gotta lose. Something's missing. I wanna cry. Something's missing. For you. With everything we know, we fought each other, yet none of us won. Now you're looking at me, you're saying it's true. You're crying for me, but your sins are for you. So cry, cry, now it's gone. Now it's gone. Things we had a crush now, like the dream was us now. I ain't saying what we should have done. We were over before we'd begun. Now you're looking at the window, looking at the rain. Someone to blame. Now it's gone and it won't come true. What can we do? Now it's gone and I wanna cry. Come, buddy. People burn out life. We're a potential suicide. Something of a dream. We're living in my street. bright, never sunny. Sunny. This is the British way of life now. Swallow my dreams like my beer. Sunday dinner with the wife now. Work all week in a company office. They don't even know my name. I feel so cold, watch me grow old. We get it now to the future, that's my dream. Marry a girl who's down the road. Support your local team. Is it a dream? Is it funny? Cause it always rains. Never sunny. Sunny. This is the British way of life now. I swallow my dreams like my beer. Sunday night, scare people with a lie. Oh, t-shirt. Real sound from the streets, from the town. Sometimes I watch you wait, signs of voices and screams. Dreaming now is just a funny joke. Can this all be just a dream? No, it can't be, it's too obscene. That's when I see you staring at me. A real sound from the streets, from the town. Silent footsteps, whispers on the ground. It's too late, the deadly underground. Cause you saw me shine out this time. We who saw you were wearing uniforms. You were wearing uniforms. Imagination, a real sound from the streets, from the town. Sometimes I go all silent, lose all sense of time. Hating eyes, nights and thoughts, where the sun don't shine, where the night don't black away. That's when I see you staring at me. Show a real sound. I can't hear you, brothers. From the streets, sisters, from the town. Silent footsteps, whispers of sound. It's too late, the deadly underground. Reality, it's just a guide from those who talk with love. Be good now, don't do nothing. 'Cause if you do, bang, 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 you're dead. Thank you. Let's wrap it up there. You never know we've been rehearsing for a week, could you?
Brett's going to sling his
Z Factor.
tambourine. Sling your tambourine.
Well done, mate.
Is it your turn? Yeah. Go, go.
I used to dream, and dream my dreams would come true.
Spain. Here they are once more, all the way from all over the world. It's the Chords!
A bloke came up to me and he said, "You probably don't remember this, but you saved my life 30 years ago." He said, "I'll explain. You played in Slam. There was fighting all the way through the gig, as there were at most gigs then. He said they went to the station, the skinheads were there, were just beating everybody up. They came home, they found our hotel, we let them in, and they all stayed in our room." And he said, "The first thing that happened, I walked in the bedroom, I dismantled the bed, threw the headboard out the window."
Sometimes I just get a feeling there's a drink inside. People laughing.
I've just seen the Chords again. The last time I seen them in Brighton, I think it was about 30 years ago in Brighton. This is actually even better because they played tighter. They seem to be enjoying it more. There's no pressure. I love Billy Hassett, but I love the other guys as well. I'm just really pleased that they're.
Don't believe anything he says, he's a complete liar.
I'm just so pleased that they're all playing again, and I hope they do it again.
This all been just a dream. Now they can't wait to obscene. Seeing people eyes on nature. A real sound from the streets, from the town. Don't forget our silence, the sense of time. Hidden eyes and minds with us. Where the sun don't shine.
I'm not trying to rewrite history or nothing, but back in the days, like the late 70s, early 80s, the whole music scene was different. It was pub-led. It was pubs all over London that had a whole music scene. It didn't have a name then. Only in hindsight it became pub rock. But you know, in North London there was the, I suppose, the Open Anchor. Camden had the castle. Is it Windsor Castle? East London had the Bridge House. You know, West London had Greyhound, and Deptford had the Deptford Arms. South London had the Old Kent Road. That was in Pears, Thomas and Beckett, and that was the thing. The bands just slogged around this circuit for years and years and years, and a lot of them went on to be the soundtracks of my youth. You know, people like Ian Jury and Elvis Costello, they all started out in pubs, and it was all considered. People now consider it was like a sleepy old man's scene, but it wasn't. It was actually really a proper rock and roll scene. That's what London had, and that was the scene that the Chords sort of were born into. You know, there wasn't a mod scene they grew into. They was just prepared to. Deptford was their spot. That was their place. Billy and Martin lived in the tower blocks there. Tower blocks where it was illegal to have a phone directory. The phone directories, because people used to throw them out the window and knock people out. You know, it's a sort of. It was quite a tough place, Deptford. But it had a music scene. You know, obviously the great Squeeze, the mighty Squeeze, you know, the ones that championed Deptford the most. But Dire Straits were down there as well, and yeah, it was a proper. It had the Albany Empire, which of course would play with 9 Below Zero. It was a real happening place, and that's what sort of grounded them off it. They were a real working class band, proper band. It was just pub rock scene, which wasn't, as I said, it wasn't called that then. That the Chords were prepared to sort of slog around and go, and that they didn't have any sort of preconceptions of going on to any bigger things other than just working hard. You know, cutting their teeth around the pubs. You know, with bands like Nick Lowe and all them people. So that was what they did in them days. It was hard work, and then you know, if you got a following, which they ultimately did, because they would do the work. The next step up was to universities and college gigs, and if that got bigger, then you would go to the Marquee or the 100 Club. I bumped into Paul a couple of days before they played their first gig at the Wellington, and I said to him, "Come down," and he was a pretty approachable enough to come down, and I was amazed he did. And from there, they were 2 weeks later they're at the Rainbow, you know, a sold out gig at the Rainbow. For them too quick, I think, from playing in pubs, they skipped out everything else and they went straight, onto bigger things. Jimmy Percy, I think, signed them because he thought they generally knew they were a really good, competent band that showed more promise, way beyond the years they were. But I also think he had a cynical eye to, this is a movement going on, I want to make a bit of money on it. I think it was 50-50 that he respected the Chords, but he also had his eye on the pound note. The idea that the Chords were a ready-made mod band, or that was wrong. They was just a real rock and roll band. They had more in common with the Clash and Buzzcocks than they did with the Jam or anything like that. Because it took their time to put a record out, this movement has started around them. Even though they was there at the beginning, unaware of it. They was just a pub band. They was unaware of it, but by the time they got to release a single, the mod thing was big and it looked a bit plastic and pony, But what people didn't realise, they were the only band on a major label. They were on Polydor. They was on Polydor because the Who. They didn't sign to Polydor because of the Jam. They signed because there was all Who fans. And I think that's one of the reasons Paul signed to Polydor, I imagine. And then the comparisons were like, oh, Billy's trying to be Paul Weller, which were absolute nonsense. So he was playing a Rickenbacker because he was a Pete Townsend fan, and the same reason that Paul Weller was playing a Rickenbacker. Billy wasn't copying Paul, but lots of Jam fans turned on him for that. It sounds ridiculous and petty and stupid, but back then it meant a lot to people, you know what I mean? You shouldn't be allowed to copy Paul Weller, or if you did. By the time they did get their single out, subtlety had gone out the window, the music press hated them, and there was bands like the Vespers, the Lambrettas, the Mods even, I used to think, why are they getting bad press? But I look back and think, that was a bit real pony, Yes, Merton Parkers, I always thought that was a good name because they lived in Merton Park, and I thought that was clever, but the rest of them, yeah. And I think that's why the Chords got a major deal. I think the only ones that were up there with them, I think, were Purple Hearts, because they were sort of organic, they didn't jump on the bandwagon, but so many of them did. And mod was a dirty word, because it's not like it is now. Everyone's happy to be called mod now, but it certainly wasn't back then. It was a real dirty word. You had to fight people. I was amazed at the level of hostility you'd get just by wearing a parka back then. I remember getting punched in the face in Oxford Street just walking down on my lunch break from Decca Records. Nicked me tiger towel. Just wrong, but now it's all good. But we fought the mod war. Another bad mood. I always thought the Chords, it was getting rid of Billy. History has proved, unless your lead singer dies, don't get rid of your lead singer, or if he leaves, then farewell, soldier on like the Stranglers did, and but sacking your lead singer, despite it wasn't like most of a few of the songs, it just wasn't a good move, No matter what you do, your lead singer's your focal point of the band, Small faces turn into the faces, I suppose, is an exception, but outside of that, no, it don't work. And that lost a lot of fans as well. I tried to get him a job with a band called the Moondogs at the time, but that never turned out. But very bad move, I always thought that. For every bad thing, they had a good thing happen until it ran out of good things. Shame. It is one of them great shames. But the Chords were in great sort of company when you look back on some great British bands like The Creation, who are more fondly known as a cult band, and who never really cracked it, who should have done. It's just a lack of, and it was basically music press led in them days. They could make or break someone. If they didn't like you, now it doesn't matter at all. They don't weld anything. If the Enemy sells 40 copies a week, I don't know. But back then it was a big thing. Deptford was the was their spot. That was their place. That was Billy and mine lived in the tower blocks there.
We started playing together when we were in the sixth form at school. We both had kind of like a musical background. We were in the school band, so we both classically trained, and then our interest moved into kind of pop and rock and punk.
When the punk thing started, we had a band in school, and I was like just playing guitars. It was a three-piece band, and I was doing the singing. Like we got more serious into it, and we had a good drummer. And then we wanted to have I wanted to concentrate on the singing bit of it.
The advert went in New Musical Express for a guitarist with new wave aspirations, and Chris Pope was the only applicant. Fortunately, he was South East London as well.
And went for an audition around Billy's house, which it took about 10 minutes. We'd done a couple of Who songs, and then we decided to get the band together.
So when Chris came in, everything changed. You know, Chris is, I think, he's really serious about things. And really, not that we weren't. It was just that we needed his force, you know, to get us off the ground. The three of us kind of progressed a notch, and we needed a drummer. And we put an advert in the papers. We got Chris for an advert, so we put an ad. And we had auditions for a drummer. It was rehearsal rooms along Tooley Street. Oh, of course, it's all gone now. It's where the Clash used to rehearse, and so Pretenders.
And I've been looking around for probably a couple of months. I mean, you can see on that advert that I've circled several ads. But it was that Keith Moon style drum I wanted that appealed.
What we happened, right, we had a list of people coming, and the first guy brought his drums, set it up, and then going, oh God, you know, you can set up drums, take them down, get them, and we've only got a studio for like 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. So we saw this kit, and it's got Pretenders in it. Oh, we get away with it, you know. So we put the kit out, and then the drums used to come in and do their thing, and some of them are quite good.
We were just packing up when Brett turned up.
Brett's come in, and he's got the parka. Right. And he sat down. He's done his thing, and we had a few songs then. I can't exactly remember what we were doing. I think it was a few Who songs then, you know. But be punky, really punky stuff from the Who.
They said, can you play Knock on Wood? And I said, yeah, I can play Knock on Wood. Never played it in my life. Made a complete balls up of it, but they said yes. I think the Target t-shirt helped.
He blew the rest away basically, and we offered him the job straight away.
And after the audition, just before, you know, and guess what he did? He busted the bass pedal. Exactly the same thing as Keith Moon. Him and Popey went away to the pub, left me and Martin to put away everything. Did we get into trouble or what? Yeah. So he was the man for us. So who did that? Keith Moon. Jesus. So and Brett fitted in nicely, you know.
Became quite friendly with Brett Ascott, who later became Buddy. I mean, to me he was always Brett then, and I always thought John Peel said on when he had them in on session, he went through the lineup and he said. And Brett Ascott on drums, what a magnificent name, and it is kind of a magnificent name, so it's almost a shame that he's now known universally as Buddy, but I think it would be very hard not to engage with him, because he was very much larger than life. I think he saw himself as the sort of Keith Moon of the group, because he had that kind of furious drumming style, but he also had that kind of quirky, mischievous. If he'd been a footballer, he'd been one of the ones cutting people's new jackets up in the dressing room. You know, he's a prankster.
But there was an immediate chemistry when the four of us got together. I'd played in bands before, but this was something completely exciting and overwhelming.
Although I was sort of several years older than them, they were into some of the same things that I was really, which was they loved the Beatles, they loved the Who and bands like that, the Small Faces, the Kinks, and they loved Motown and Stax and things like that, which were the things that were kind of staple for me.
I'd given up being a student. I don't think Chris gave up gave up school. I think Brett gave up working for his brother. I think Bill had probably the securest job with the London Electricity Board. So yeah, we weren't sort of wealthy. None of us had cars. We all lived at home with our parents.
That's how we started. We practiced at the pubs, all freebie. I mean, we were only kids, and the landlords used to let us play in the place. I think the first pub we played in was called the Woodman, and it's gone. All these places, just off Evelyn Street. We played a gig, and the guy that was playing the drums, he was a great drummer, but I think we had a falling out about something, and he left, and we really needed a drummer. So Chris introduced his friend, Paul Halpin. Even Halpin said he wasn't a great drummer. He wasn't a great drummer. Yeah. So we started doing Thompson Becket and places like that. Obviously then things started to come a bit better for us.
I think we didn't do much in '78. There were about 3 or 4 gigs, mainly either just local pubs at Deptford, doing covers really, just in our way, just getting through it. And I was young, I was 16 that time, so was doing that, still being at school. And then I think by November we had a gig at the Thompson Becket in Old Kent Road. I think we flew our 3rd drummer out of that period of time, and I sat down and wrote a few songs, and by January of that next year we auditioned Brett, and by March the year 2 months later the record deal. So that was pretty quick. I think we done 3 gigs with Brett and got the deal.
Well, there isn't a regularly. I mean, we straight into it. We rehearsed 3 times in someone's kitchen. Jim Long, bless him. Did some rehearsals at Alaska Studios in Waterloo. Dragged the manager in one lunchtime and blagged him that we were a covers band who played Beatles songs.
And when Brett joined, soon after, really, we were playing. We were playing at Aztec, I think, studio, just off Waterloo.
Just under the arches.
Yeah, just on the arches there. And just, again, me and Martin went into Wellington, and we said to the guy, the landlord, look, you've got no one in the pub on a Saturday, can we play here? And he said, what kind of music? You're not into that punky stuff, are you? No. So we do the Beatles. There's only one Beatles song we really did then, that was I saw us standing there. So I've run back and I said, the guy's coming down to have a look at us. Not punky, we've got to do Beatles. What? So he's coming and I saw her standing there, and he's going, So anyway, we had our own PA and everything then, so we just set up and we would go around. I mean, in those days there were so many bands playing all the time, and so you could go to a gig nearly every night if you wanted to. It was just amazing. So I was out, me and Terry Rawlings would go out and we'd be distributing flyers for the gig, and it was amazing because all the mods turned up at the Wellington.
And I saw them for the first time during one of their residency stays at the Wellington at Waterloo on a Saturday night. And that was a fantastic experience, and indeed they played there on quite a number of occasions, getting a progressively bigger crowd every time, becoming more professional, getting more attuned to playing in front of a bigger audience, and generally honing their skills.
And it was just instant success. And of course the landlord said to us, "Can you play next week?"
Yeah,
of course. And the amazing thing is, we got nothing, no money, no. And he was making. We saw him putting the slops into the pints. Of course, we were all kids. We were all 16-year-olds. Yeah. So it was just brilliant. It was great. And of course, word of mouth, he became the place, Wellington.
Until the manager got greedy and said he was going to start charging for people to come in. I mean, he was taking bundles at the bar, but it wasn't enough. He decided that it should be a paying gig, so we didn't do it after that. As a point of protest, the sort of thing we did all the time, being the socialists that we were.
So rooted Everyone's so nice to me. They say hello, how are you? Smile, laugh along. I don't think they like me much at all. But if I see I'll live and die, say hello and wave goodbye, 'cause the grass is greener on the other side. Something of a dream when you live in my street. Woo! Sunshine stands so high you could cut it with a knife. Everybody wants what the others have got, despising their own lives. With ambition, you get so rich and go so far. Nothing goes, we're gonna miss, and nothing happens like you wish. But everyone's so nice to me. They say hello, how are we? Smile when I walk and laugh when I fall. I don't think they like me much at all. Oh, but in my street I'll live and die. Say hello and wave goodbye, 'cause the grass is greener on the other side. Something of a dream. In my street they hate and lie, washed up people, burnt out lives. We're all potential suicides. Something of a dream. When you're living in my street, the kids playing in the garden, learn to hate, fear and lie. None of this really matters. This world will just pass them by. Pass them by. Oh, pass them by. Say hello and wave goodbye, 'cause the grass is greener on the other side. Something of a dream. In my street they hate and lie, watch some people with burnt out lives. We're all potential suicides. Something of a dream. When you're living in my street, living in my street, my street. 'Cause this is what they want.
At a certain point in time, you were aware of a lot of bands from different bits of London. You know, the band I was in was from southwest London, the Chords was southeast, and there's that sort of East End, Essex, sort of Purple Arts, Secret Affair, and they're all bands that sort of seem to sort of vaguely emerge in a sort of broader public awareness at about the same time, I suppose.
We didn't really. We started doing gigs with them. It was a shock that there were other mod bands who were sort of playing similar stuff or wearing similar clothes. But you're talking about a matter of weeks and months.
It kind of moved pretty quickly. So from within kind of just a few rehearsals, we put together a few dates, and there was some interest straight away, and probably within 6 months things really started to take off.
Our first tour proper was with these guys, the Undertones.
Yeah.
And it was the perfect slot for us. It was their first UK tour, and we supported them.
Yeah.
And it was just a marriage made in heaven. It really was. And their fans loved us.
The kind of two bands complemented each other really well. And even though the Chords was support, you know, they always got an absolutely brilliant reception. And it was when you saw the reception they got from a crowd who'd gone there to see the Undertones that you realised that their appeal was far wider than the kind of narrow confines of kind of mod, as it was called at the time.
First came across Chords actually in I think it would have been 1980.
they supported the Undertones for, I think, about 8. I had a look actually recently. I think it was about 8 or 9 shows. So it was like half a tour we were doing. Around summer, maybe Easter, May 1980. And automatically I took a shine to them because I really liked them musically. I know they sort of were part of the mod scene, but to me anyway, they could have been more like the Undertones than the American Parkers or whatever, you know. They were more of a guitar-based band rather than a mod image band, you know. And that, just basically, I really like their songs.
I just think there was as much in their kind of makeup. There was as much of a sort of Clash as there was a sort of Jam influence. And really, I just think they seemed like they were into the Who. I mean, Buddy particularly was sort of, you know, he had a lot of sort of the spirit of Moon, and you could tell he liked him. But that wasn't all he was about. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff where he's playing quite a sort of driving beat is sort of quite northern soul-y, but that's just my perception of it. But maybe they might have had a bit more joy if they'd not been lumped in with that. I mean, at the time, I think it got a little bit of sort of press awareness for people, but it was just quite a thorny thing, you know, to be tarred with in a way.
Well, I said we're not a mod band, we're a punk band. And at the beginning, we were basically punks in Parkers. Yeah. And it wasn't like trying to go back into time to 60s. We were continuing and just calling it mod. But trying to, because kind of punk went and it had the power pop thing happening.
Something about their sound that grabbed me. I found that they weren't just kind of trying to recreate the things that had gone before. They were trying to put a new spin on it. They'd taken on some of the edginess of punk, which I think is evident on a track like Maybe Tomorrow, you know, which is their kind of magnum opus, I suppose.
I didn't really get it. I didn't understand why people wanted to totally rehash the 60s in a kind of like Herman's Hermits type, you know, skinny tie and like just really wimpy 60s stuff. I didn't understand. It wasn't for me at all. I'd much more grown up with being 15 and the Pistols and the Clash and going back and listening to the Who. So that was always where I was coming from. I wasn't really interested in these guys trying to relive some sort of part of the 60s that I didn't want to be in the first place.
Some people have said that mod became a bit of a dirty word, even though other revival type things were seen as being okay, like rockabilly and ska and what have you. And I'm not sure if that was a kind of music press led thing where very educated rock journalists, music was about rebellion and it had to be a bit dirty and sleazy, and I think the kind of the cleanliness and the kind of imagery of it just didn't sit right with certain music journalists' perception of what vibrant rock music should be or whatever. Sounds a bit highfalutin, but it's just an idea. Could be wrong.
So right here, I feel I'm so out of touch. Have I said something wrong? 'Cause I feel like being trapped, searching for the words for my best is just my fate. Who's up there? You're pulling my string. I guess you're just too late. You think that I can see what these bastards have done? I think I know.
And then at the Wellington, it was, I guess, about a month, maybe 6 weeks later, we were playing away, and Mr. Weller came and saw us.
I bumped into Paul Weller a couple of days before they played their first gig at the Wellington, and I said to him, come down, and he was approachable enough to come down, and I was amazed he did.
And I think he kind of like enjoyed the evening. And after, he said, would you like to play the Rainbow?
Well, we started in March, I think, gigging, and by May we were playing the Rainbow with the Jam, which is just ridiculous. We weren't prepared. We were under-rehearsed and overexposed. But we did okay. I mean, we were attracting fans very early on, and they stuck with us.
We soon discovered Jam fans don't like the Chords.
And then the comparisons were like, oh, Billy's trying to be Paul Weller, which was absolute nonsense. So he was playing a Rickenbacker because he was a Pete Townsend fan. The same reason that Paul Weller was playing a Rickenbacker, but he wasn't copying Paul. But lots of Jam fans turned on him for that. So that was, it wasn't. It sounds ridiculous and petty and stupid, but back then it meant a lot to people. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be allowed to copy Paul Weller.
So everyone's got this thing about like the chords being similar to Jam.
to you. Another thing coming to you. Come on. A bit more tuneful. Another thing coming to you. Yeah. Coming to you. Another thing coming to you.
Jimmy Percy would have heard our demo that we did for Polydor and then decided he liked the sound of it and wanted to sign us as one of his first bands on his burgeoning JP Productions label, which was an imprint of Polydor.
You know, Jimmy came in to see me and he said he wanted to sign the Chords, and I said, well, I'd probably seen him by then because I can't remember the first time I saw the Chords. I'd probably seen him by the time Percy had signed it, for sure. The one thing that attracted me to the band, I will say, is that because I'm from South East London and so were they, so there was an element because I grew up in South East London. I grew up in the music scene in the 60s of South East London and I knew it well. And that did sort of was a tie for me.
I remember we were playing at the Rock Garden, Covent Garden, and Jimmy Percy brought his manager along then, and pretty soon after that they invited us up to a meeting at the Polydor offices.
I could see that, you know, they had potential. There was nothing that you think, well, I wish they could get another singer, or, you know, get rid of this, or, you know, the drummer can't play. There didn't appear to be those kind of problems. Musically, they were there. They were a lot better than a lot of other groups that I'd worked with from the beginning of their career.
We didn't really jump at it, but we thought, well, you know, again, Jimmy Percy, Shams, is a more punky kind of thing on here. Maybe it would be good for us. So we signed, actually, to his label, and Jimmy got us to do Now It's Gone. And it was really weird because, you know, his persona was this, you know, and he took me to one side and he was talking about my feelings and stuff towards, what? How do you feel about it? I don't know, I've never thought about it really. Well, you know, what do you think about when you sing it? The end, the words, you know. And it was really good because his production was great, really, really good. But again, it was a punk thing where he had these ideas of putting the single on a Target vinyl. Chris was going mad, he didn't want to be, you know, into that mod thing. The mods don't like us, you know.
I don't think I was ever too enamoured with Jimmy Percy. I'm not like shouted, you know, it was just the way he was. I think he wanted to sort of dress us up totally as kind of like a mod band with, like, you know, scooters and Lambrettas and Partas, and it wasn't what we were wearing, I think what we were doing.
I guess back then there were a lot of sort of factions, and nowadays the edges blur.
We started touring in May '79. Literally, I went on Tone's tour, and then we were just playing all the time. We did September, I think we did a single called Now It's Gone came out, and we did a 30-day tour of England. So it was just constantly gigging and touring and recording.
We had already done the single on the B-side, and it was brilliant, and it was going to be, there was a release date. It would have been before the Merton Parkers.
It was never released, and the Merton Parkers got there before us and released You Need Wheels.
That's the element of luck you need, and I don't think they had it. I don't think the place was quite right, the timing was quite right. It was just everything was slightly out of kilter.
We were supporting the Undertones, the Guildford Civic Hall. So Jimmy Percy turned up as our guest and came backstage before the gig and said, all right lads, I'll come on for the encore, we can do Balls Till Breakout if you want.
We have this policy, we don't jam with anybody. Plus the fact we don't even like the idea of jamming with anybody. I think it's kind of a hippie thing, you know, from the 70s days, you know, when supergroups used to jam, Eric Clapton would jam with Jeff Beck or whatever. So we politely told them no, our tour manager told them no, we don't do that kind of thing.
And Percy just went nuts. He just went completely balmy. I think he had last heard the word no about 2 years earlier.
But unfortunately, he didn't take no for an answer. So we did a show.
He went to the back of the hall with Paul Cook and Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols, accumulated a mass of skinheads in the hall, probably about 100 of them. And while the undertones were on, I was sitting on the balcony, and on the far side of the hall I saw them making their way through the throng on the other side of the hall.
Jimmy Pursley followed with the two Sex Pistols coming up as well. And we were like, what's going on here? Mayhem ensued basically. These skinhead guys were shouting in the mic and stuff. And it was all just going crazy. So we virtually legged it off the stage.
And the skinheads were knocking over the lighting rigs, breaking up the drum kit, kicking the amps over.
But meanwhile, the crowd with the skinheads had knocked over this lighting rig, accidentally obviously, but I remember it falling in slow motion and just missing our bass player, Mickey Bradley, by inches. I mean, basically, he could have been killed, or it could have been Curtis Mayfield, or what happened to him. So it was, absolutely outrageous what happened. PA was cut. They took the PA down. I think some of the roadies managed to grab our amps off as well. I remember Steve Jones actually was on the drums for some reason and going, why is the fucking power cut turned off? He was just an arsehole. And I remember thinking at the time going, he used to be my hero, the Sex Pistols. I love the Sex Pistols, so really, it went down in my estimation.
And they just completely finished the gig. And the undertones were in tears. I was full of unspeakable rage. I have never been so angry in my life, and I just said to the other lads that night, if we don't get off Percy's label, I'm leaving the band. I'm not going to work with him ever.
So they felt, the Chords, I know the Chords at the time felt really embarrassed, really pissed off with Percy about that, that occasion, what happened.
And we had a showdown with him at Polydor on the Monday, which was a very frightening experience because, as I say, nobody said no to Jimmy Percy, and we said, we want out. After what you did, they're our friends, the Undertones. You could have killed somebody on stage. Basically, we're out of here.
I know the consequences of that was bad for the Chords because they were on his label and they insisted on leaving his label after that. And was that a good idea or not? Maybe, I'm not sure, but you're gonna have to ask him that.
I think the day after Buddy came in to see me, and he was really, upset. And he said that I'd rather give up. He said, that's it. He said, we don't want to record for him anymore.
To be honest, it's kind of felt honoured that they left. They didn't have to. Could have just went on and put the single out. But it shows you how much they were pissed off about it as well. So, they stuck to their principles in a way, which is kind of very admirable.
We were in limbo then for a long, long time. We had John Peel sessions then, and that was marvellous.
So what saved us was that we went into the studio to do a Peel session up at the BBC in Maida Vale, and still to this day I think it's the best thing we ever did on tape. I think it was just the two producers caught the chords at their best. It was basically live, very little overdubs. I don't know whether it was the anger or the energy that came through, but I'm really glad that it got released in the end on Detour.
I've been listening to Peel for years, as a kid for 13, 14, and then he's going on. It's surreal because he's talking about me, and it was just a great, great feeling.
Yeah. Those BBC sessions were really unique.
Then interest started to happen again until we were picked up by Virgin, and it was really weird. There were a few record companies that were interested, but Virgin said to us, we will give you a 9-album deal, 9 years, What? 9 years? We were only, Chris was 17. It seemed like a lifetime. I think because of The Who and Slade, the Polydor was, and Virgin was only starting at that point, and we weren't quite sure what a big mistake.
Polydor thought, well, what have we got here? We've got 4 Mavericks who don't do what they're told, and they don't toe the party line.
I mean, everyone knew the problems we had with Polydor. well documented, because the jam were on Polydor, and it was kind of like, you know, we were supposedly coming across to the same audience as them, so it was always been difficult for us to do that without sounding sort of like angry or bitter about it. It was something we could do about it because we were signed without any agreement for us to do anything, you know. I think there was a clause in the contract with the Jimmy Percy's, because it was to do with Polydor, but Polydor had the first option, so they took us up. And you know, it's kind of I think they took us up as if like, oh, we might as well just take them on, but didn't really think, you know, have any interest in us at the time. So there was always kind of like 2 or 3 other labels that were kind of going for us, but obviously Polydor had the option, they took us on.
And then we signed them direct. And I remember, because we celebrated a little too long, and they played a gig at the Nashville, which they trashed. And I said afterwards that it's a good job there's no one from the company, because they absolutely trashed the whole set.
Polydor in the end picked up the contract, I think, as a result of the Peel session. But I think the cold feet that they'd shown, those cold, dead feet they'd put upon us, I think it showed that they really didn't believe in us. I think they saw us as a backup plan, possibly for the Jam or one of the other bands that they had.
I made sure that they got a fair deal, but I couldn't go to my boss and say, well, give them 60 grand, because he'd say no. Buddy was great. I mean, I loved his total naivety, and he was so naive, it was beyond belief that anyone could be that naive. Really beyond belief. I mean, but to me, that's what I like, because the music business was very cynical. Very, very, and not as bad as now, but it was a very cynical business. And it was refreshing. Buddy was refreshing. Martin was a good bass player, but he couldn't sing to save his life. I mean, that's the only thing that was the drawback with Martin. Billy I liked a lot. I thought he was a good singer. He got it across well. I remember with watching On Top of the Pops, where he was doing the Pete Townsend wheeling his arm, and I mean, I had to laugh because he was looking in the monitor. He was actually looking at himself appearing on Top of the Pops, and it was funny.
But certainly I remember them on Top of the Pops, and I remember thinking that Billy particularly commanded the stage, had a real presence, and you would have put your money on them cracking it and him, you know, being a star.
Chris was a bit on the moody side. I mean, he was, I suppose, what you call the artistic temperament. But he was okay, and I mean, I quite actually enjoyed being with him.
Chris and Martin were always kind of a bit more kind of in the background, you know, brooding, moody. I don't think I ever exchanged more than about 3 words with Martin, but the other two, Buddy and Billy, more than make up for that with their sort of larger-than-life personalities.
In provincial Britain in the 1980s, all pubs closed at 10:30 during the week. Hotels didn't have bars, not the ones we were staying at. So we'd inevitably retreat to somebody's room, always me and Chris's room, and we'd drink till 3 and then trash the room because there was nothing else to do.
They used to drink like fish. They just used to get whacked, finish the gig, get drunk, and it was all Tennants, it was all strong lager.
It's addressed to Mr. Halpin, our road manager, and it begins. Dear Sir, it is with regret that I find it necessary to enclose an account for damages to room 53, which you booked for the 19th of May 1980.
Remember going into, I think it was Buddy's room, and the bath was full of beer. Tins of beer, cold water and beer.
And it continues, the room has recently been constructed and therefore newly decorated and furnished. But the deplorable condition in which you vacated the room means that it requires complete redecoration.
And it was a good gig, I remember. We came back and I went to bed and I put the chair against the door to stop any nonsense.
On the large amounts of broken glass, particularly in the bath and on the surrounding floor, empty beer cans and bottles, a torn single sheet and a single divan mattress which appeared to have been urinated on. Not so.
When I got up, I went into Buddy's room and it was quite amazing. In those days, when, as a senior product manager, I could approve the junior product managers if they wanted to spend money, and I was given a stamp, and it was stamped approved Dennis Mundy.
The most disturbing act of vandalism is the act of stamping in indelible ink the words "Approved Dennis Mundy" on walls, ceiling, picture frames, both upholstered bed heads, and on the bathroom tiles, together with the removal and the breaking of the toilet roll holder.
And when I went in, someone had stamped all the wallpaper. It was everywhere. I actually left through the window. I was on the ground floor. I thought, no, I can't deal with this.
I sincerely hope that blah 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 blah. The story behind that, Your Honour, is that just before the tour started, we stole Dennis Mundy's approval stamp from his desk with an indelible ink pad. And the temptation was just too great, I'm afraid. Bit of a cliche, isn't it? Bands breaking up hotels and stuff.
And we got the bill, and I think it was only 300 quid. And I said to Paul, you know, you're going to have to pay this. I can swing a lot of things, but I mean, you know, redecorating a room, I don't think that's...
And we were banned from every Trust House 40 hotel in the country. Particularly proud of that, actually.
really want the first single to let the press, everyone know that here's a band. And they did okay. They did okay in the press. They had a following. So, you know, for me, that was a good start. You've got to start somewhere. No matter who would have produced it, I think you'd have ended up in the same place. I honestly don't believe that if people had produced it, might have sounded better, who knows, but I don't think it would have done any better. That's the thing. I don't think it was a good song, but it wasn't great. It wasn't, you know, out the box, as they say.
The song Maybe Tomorrow, I think there was some that I think that was basically about that sort of the atmosphere that was around in southeast London at the time, with the fears about the NF, you know, and I think they picked up on that and reflected that. You know, I mean, bands like the Manic Street Preachers are doing that sort of stuff today, and it's regarded as very cutting edge and very political. And I don't think the Chords have had their due acclaim for that single. You know, I think it is a real gem. It should have done a lot better than it did in the charts, and it's always been a bit of a mystery to me why it didn't, because everybody who comes into contact with that song loves it.
They wrote and played good songs. That's the difference. If you go back to the Purple Hearts, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what songs the Purple Hearts sang. And there were loads of bands like that. Long, Tall, Shorty, and all sorts of things. There were bands coming out the woodwork.
As soon as Chris came in, I mean, we were doing like Small Faces, Kinks stuff. I said, Taurus Standing There. I used to do it, I'm mad about John Lennon, Working Class Hero, and they used to go, oh no. And then I think Chris had enough of it, and he said, look, try this.
Chris was a good songwriter. It was quite evident from early on that he could write a tune. And I mean, a lot of those other mod revival bands, I didn't think they could write songs. I mean, even Secret Affair, they had one or two good songs, but I really didn't think the album stood up.
And Martin used to write songs, early on he used to write a few more. I Don't Want to Know is a very early favourite. Don't Go Back, we used to start the show with, I think. But they didn't really contribute much. It fell to Chris to do most of it. And obviously I did absolutely nothing. I was just a drummer.
Well, So Far Away's favourite track, but we do the British Way of Life at Justice, I think, at the moment, the way we did it. And there's Maybe It Tomorrow.
But 9 times out of 10, he comes up with the goods.
This stuff's just average, I'll be honest about it. You know, but you know, I think most bands have got, who only made 2 or 3 albums, have got like 5 or 10 songs, you know.
But I think he was under a lot of pressure in the Chords. It was the Polydor would schedule a release even if you didn't have a song written. They said, right, you're having a new single out in November. And we say, we haven't got a song. You've got to go and write one.
I personally think if we had been on another record label, I think that we'd have stand a better chance.
When we got to the album, is who was going to produce them, because they didn't want Peter Wilson. Buddy came up with Andy Arthur, and I got Andy in, but I realised that they were a handful. So whoever was going to get the job needed to be able to, you know, have a firm hand on them. And Andy came across as that. He really was a nice guy. He had a good sense of humour, and he did a really good job on the album. I remember going to the studios, and you'd open the door and no one was in, and the Redan pub, which was just up the road, they'd be in there. Andy Arthurs would be in there, Roger Wake, the engineer, and they'd all be in there drinking. For me, as a debut album goes, of that era, you really have the Jam, the Clash, the Pistols, which was really their greatest hits, and the Susie. That they were the 4 key albums. Well, I don't think that the Chords was far off of him in terms of a debut album.
I was a mod in Stoke-on-Trent in the mid-60s, mid to late 60s. Of course, you've got to remember, the mod thing happened in London much earlier. Stoke-on-Trent was always kind of catching up, but it really kind of took hold there. And I think you'll still find scooter clubs and ska nights and things like that in the potteries. And having had that sort of background, when it came to wanting somebody to write about the sort of mod revival, I was kind of in the frame, and I kind of homed in on them because there was something about them I liked. They weren't just kind of trying to recreate things that had gone before. They were trying to put a new spin on it, and they'd taken on some of the edginess of punk, which I think is evident on a track like Maybe Tomorrow, you know, which is their kind of magnum opus, I suppose.
We had an entourage follow us out to Paris. There were about 40 British mods came to see us, and they were drinking all day, taking handfuls of medication, I don't know where they got it. And it was just running battles up and down the street between French rockers and teddy boys and these British mods. And at one point we were doing an interview with Paolo Hewitt of Melody Maker then in a hotel, and we heard all this screaming and shouting out the window. So we opened the window and looked out into the alleyway. I think his name's Ray, was standing there, and there was a French rocker with a gun pointed at him from about 20 yards away. And his reaction was to go, "Kill him!" Which was an unusual reaction when you're having a gun pointed at you. I don't think I would, but that was diffused happily, and we got them into the hotel and managed to break it up. And then we did the gig and walked out on stage in front of 1,000 people, and there was no amp. There was no sound coming from Chris's amp. There was no noise, not a peep. So we changed the plug, we changed the fuse, we changed all the leads. And after 5-6 minutes of keeping these wonderful Parisians waiting, we discovered that the road manager, Mr. Halpin, had unplugged the speaker box to put my fan in to keep me cool. So he was only thinking of me. But that rather, there's a bit of a damp squib coming out to that. But we did okay in the end, apart from all the fighting in the hall, which was pretty difficult.
I was invited to a critics preview of Quadrophenia in Wardour Street in some little film theatre. And I remember taking them along, and there were these sort of lofty film critics there with making notes, and I had the Chords spread along the back row with me, you know, and they were all sort of lounging, watching the film, and when they were kind of taking it in, and then the music came on. I remember 5:15, the Who track coming on, da, 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 and all of a sudden I was aware of these 4 guys next to me all going in their chairs, you know, and I think there was a few sniffy looks from the film critics.
I think the Chords, and particularly Buddy, they took some of the criticism too hard. You have to roll with the punches.
I think this is the journalist who was tied to a tree by the Stranglers. Right. I don't advocate that sort of behaviour. However, when she wrote the article, which I can quote you verbatim, but I don't want to sound like some kind of regressive paranoid, I was horrified. She just printed a load of lies. I think from that moment we realised that as a journalist you can just write what you want and you've got no comeback. There's no recourse to the law, and we've got scathing reviews.
My view's always been a bad review is the same as a good review. It's one person's comment. It's not going to kill you. If someone writes about you, I don't think there's an artist alive that hasn't had a bad review or bad editorial. It's something you've got to come to terms with quickly.
They never really got behind us. We never made a video. They never had enough copies pressed up. When the album went in at number 30, we were promised it would go up. Maybe number 20 the next week. Nobody could buy it. Nobody could find it. The record shops were all sold out. And the moment was lost again. We were in a constant battle with Polydor, and Dennis Mundy got the brunt of that, unfortunately.
I did their A&R because at the time I was doing the A&R for the Jam and their product manager and Sham. And so I would do both jobs. Because there was no point assigning an A&R man, because I knew the band, I related to the band.
We didn't have an A&R man, so there was no, you get signed by an A&R man signed the band and sort of like nurtures them and progresses them through. Because we actually weren't signed originally to Polydor, there was no one who looked after us apart from a production manager, who was the guy called Dennis Munday, who just oversaw loads of things with Susan the Banshees, the Jam, Roxy Music and the Who. I think he was pretty busy. But there was no one really sort of like, look up, and we didn't have a manager either. So, it was we used to work up Polydor ourselves 2 or 3 times a week, usually at Nick Records. Get pissed, cause a nuisance, so that obviously went down well. But no, it was basically hands on ourselves doing it.
They didn't have a lot of direction, which was always their problem as a group. It was like dealing with an octopus. You chop one leg off and there'll be another leg coming round the corner.
We had a lot of screaming rows with him, although in retrospect I realised he was doing his best for us. He was like a surrogate manager, really, Dennis, and I'm grateful for the time and the work that he put in.
I remember mixing some demos, and each one would go up and turn his instrument up. And you sit there and think, no, this is stupid, because it's going to end up with everything's going to be louder than everything else. And there was an element of that about it.
There was a lot of, they were too strong. You know, I think Chris probably was the leader because he wrote the songs, but everyone else was weighing in with their opinions as well. And they shot themselves in the foot a hell of a lot, I think. You know, they didn't make the right decisions at times.
When something's missing, they wanted another track, and I said, no, you've got to go with that because it's commercial. And they said, well, no, we want to do this because it's a better song. And I said to them, well, that doesn't mean it's going to be a hit. A great song doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a hit record from it. It doesn't. Yeah, a hit record is a completely different animal.
We didn't really have sort of a manager, and we didn't have sort of a management behind us to coordinate and organise those sorts of things, so we just really left in the hands of Polydor to do what they did, and we wouldn't have known at the time whether they were doing it properly.
My job was to coordinate everything. You know, from when they go into record to get the sleeve done, that kind of thing. You basically, and to take care of the market.
I actually think that they were quite fortunate that they were with Polydor, because I think a lot of other labels, and I think, were just trying to make a fast buck, and they just saw it as a fad. And at least there were some people, well, I think there were, I mean, they'd know more than me, but there were some people that seemed to give them the time, and there seemed to be a bit of thought behind the way, you know, things were produced and what have you. So I think that's probably to their advantage in terms of the artistic records they put out, that they didn't rush into it.
Maybe signing to Polydor as well was a bad idea because they had the jam. So they were Polydor were concentrating on the jam, and the Chords were second fiddle. So they should have maybe gone to somebody else, Virgin Records or something, be compared to the jam because they're on the same label, which you wanted to get away from that, from the jam comparisons, you know. So they should have, again with guidance, they probably would have signed a different label. And things might have turned out for the better, who knows. Sorry, Andy Ferguson and Anderson's definitely managed to offer to manage the Chords, but they turned them down. And I don't know why, they got all their offers as well, I think, from various people. So they never had a proper manager. Now, you know, all groups, especially, you know, you're starting out, especially you're almost nearly made it, you need that extra pushing, that extra experienced person to make it happen.
We were approached at one time by the Undertones management, and I was all for it, and his idea was to get us out of Polydor and get us on Sire or WEA. His name's Andy Arthurs. Why we didn't, I have no idea. It was perplexing because he'll take 10%. We got 10% of nothing, man. I mean, let him take it. He's given us a direct. No, can't be trusted. 10%. Ridiculous.
The lack of management was our Achilles heel. We were 4 kids fighting each other with a road manager who was Chris's best mate and had been the drummer previous to me. Prior to me, I should say. It was just 5 strong-willed, headstrong idiots, and we didn't know what direction we were going in or how to go in that direction. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a clue. We just went from one crisis to another.
At the end of the day, it's all down to kind of personalities. There were 4 very, very different personalities, which is a fantastic thing sometimes in terms of kind of creating energy amongst 4 people, but it also can be, if not kind of handled, and here's maybe where the management thing comes in, it can also potentially be a bit destructive.
So we had these 2 A-sides recorded. Empty Dreams, which was favoured by myself and Billy, and Chris and Martin wanted In My Street to be released against our very strong wishes. And so we needed a tie break, and it fell to Dennis, and I think he chose the safer option in his eyes. and that stalled at number 50. We didn't get top of the pops, and that was the beginning of the end for Billy, I'm afraid. He'd gone off the rails a little bit. He'd got a bit aggressive with Chris.
I was causing the unrest in the camp, and then all of a sudden I get married.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And that thing didn't really go down well with the other lads because I wanted to go home.
And then after that, Billy would only turn up for the sound check and the gig, which he still did to the best of his abilities, but he wasn't talking to us. We weren't rehearsing, and it was really falling apart. And it was like a marriage breaking up where they're not talking to each other, and we just didn't talk to each other.
It was wrong, you know. I needed someone to sit me down and say, Billy, you're part of the group.
Yeah.
You're part of the group, man. You don't go home with the road crew.
Yeah.
The guys that I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be with them because I just wanted to go home. You know?
He sort of compounded the problem by behaving very strangely that night. He actually spat on the audience at one point, which is the same thing that drove Roger Waters to write The Wall for Pink Floyd, because you just reach a point where you're treating your audience with such contempt that you dismiss them with a mouthful of gob, and something's gone seriously wrong at that point. And we sort of, I think we made a decision that we had to throw him out.
So I get the phone call, Billy, we don't want you in the band. You don't want me? I don't want you.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And I believe Chris wasn't even there. I think what they were trying to do was threaten me with the sack. And I was supposed to be contrite and get on my knees and say, please, please, please. Which I should have done. What a big mistake.
I can still remember Buddy telling me on the phone that they were going to kick Billy out, and I felt, you know, this was all wrong, and I felt very grieved about it because I wasn't living with it day to day. I didn't know the tensions within the band.
We thought the strong points of the Chords were Chris's songs and us as an entity, without contemplating what it meant to the audience. And for them, Billy was the Chords, most of them. He was the focal point, he was the star, he's the lead singer. We didn't even think about it, because we just, as I say, we're just not planning things.
You know, history has proved, you know, if your lead singer dies, you know, don't get rid of your lead singer, you know, or if he leaves, then, you know, farewell, soldier on like the Stranglers did, and you know, but sacking your lead singer, despite, you know, it wasn't like most of the, well, a few of the songs, it just wasn't a good move, you know. No matter what you do, your lead singer's your focal point of the band, you know.
After watching Amazing Journey, I realised that's exactly the same. But Roger Daltrey was out for 6 months, and The Who contacted him, and why didn't they do that to me? We're exactly the same as The Who.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly the same. Why didn't they contact me? Because they found it so difficult. Now, they sacked me. I mean, they didn't sack me. It just went out of proportion. Next thing, I was gone. And we had an American tour booked. Warner Brothers were really interested in signing us for the US. And things were happening on that side of the Atlantic.
It's very difficult to talk about because I love Bill, and I think he's been a fantastic friend to me over the years. And looking back, I think that it was a culmination of events, and the situation got out of hand. Nobody put their arm around us. Nobody said to Bill, you're being unreasonable. Nobody said to us, you're throwing away a fantastic asset and a good friend.
I was working in Surrey Docks, on the wood yards, toting wood. Honestly, to get a few bob for Christmas. I've gone from the Chords to toting wood. I know what it's like working in the sawmills. So my parents had moved to Ireland, and my mum phoned up. She said, "Why don't you come over?" Why not? So I went to Ireland. That was the end of me then.
it was an enormous disappointment to me when Billy left, and at that sort of point really, although the band obviously carried on and had continued to have some success, it wasn't quite the kind of the chords that I'd remembered with the sweat dripping down the walls at the Wellington and such like.
Well, when it came to Billy going, that's when it all started to go wrong. It's very difficult when you're dealing with a band with no leader, and that's what they were. That's where the problem lies. And really, I suppose, if I'm going to be honest, Chris should have taken the lead. He was the songwriter. He was giving him the direction. In the same way, say, Weller did with the Jam.
Billy had some problems and he left the band. And so when your singer leaves the band, I would take it on, which I didn't really want to do.
But I think Chris had the added pressure of having to come up with the bulk of the material, and that's difficult because at least in the undertones, my brother John wrote most of the songs, but me and Mickey Bradley would be chipping in with extra songs to help for the LP, and even a few singles. Chris, unfortunately, most of the time looked like he was on his own, so I think the pressure got to him as well. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, and if you look at the sort of some of the early stuff that Chris produced, which was particularly strong, the kind of the Now It's Gone's, the Maybe Tomorrow's, the British Way of Life's, Something's Missing. These were all fantastic songs, and which were obviously songs that Chris had for quite some time, and maybe there was that pressure of the kind of the difficult second album, if you like, in terms of asking a songwriter to kind of bring out more stuff beyond that which he's been creating for probably many years as he's been growing up. So there was, without a shadow of a doubt, a lot of pressure on Chris to do that.
I mean, I think Chris was sort of quite an exceptional writer, and I think he still is. I mean, always like a sort of strong narrative to a lot of Chris's things. It is a sort of small play, there's a sort of scene, and the vocalist is a narrator, and it's sort of, they're quite compelling, I think.
We took a while finding a new singer.
First interview with the Chords was up at the Polydor offices, sort of going into the boardroom at Polydor and seeing that bunch sitting there. It all seemed to go quite well, and then the next thing was we had to get together in the studio. I turned up quite drunk, so spoiled it all really. He said, come and redo it, but this time don't get drunk beforehand. We went along, had another session, and yeah, thankfully that one turned out all right. So it was good.
But when you're climbing, you've got to keep that momentum going, and they didn't. They took it far too long, and by that time they'd lost their momentum.
We lost momentum, we lost fans, we lost focus, and we lost patience with each other, and Polydor certainly lost patience with us. Interviewing 160 people up at their offices, one after another.
It just took so long, and even for me it was wearing me out, because they'd play me the singers, and a lot of them were just rubbish. I mean, Kip was good. I mean, I've got no complaints.
And Kip, he had a track record. He'd come from the Vibrators.
I saw an advert for a position of vocalist with the Vibrators, so I jumped on that one. So I joined the Vibrators for a while, did 2 singles with them, and then it was decided that wasn't going anywhere at that particular time. So another advert came along, and I phoned that one up, and that turned out to be the Chords. And that, as they say, was that.
Had a really good voice. Possibly it was too rock, the Chords, but he could get high, and Chris has always written songs in a very high key. So, and it was a tough job to follow Billy. Big boots to fill, and I think he did a really good job of it. I don't think he got a fair crack of the whip. He wasn't Billy, was he?
I think Chris should have started singing then. It would have solved all the problems. That they would have had the continuity.
2 gigs with the Vapors, and I think that was just sort of trying it all out and seeing what was happening. The gigs were great, really good. It's really quite a sight to behold when you come out of the gig after a sound check and you see about 1,000 scooters in the car park and queues going off around the block. You sort of think to yourself, well, yeah, this is pretty good.
Without a relative, even a top 30 record, I would have picked up the option, without a shadow of doubt. But without that, I couldn't go to my boss, because he's saying, well, we got to pay him X amount of money. The punk thing's imploded. and that the mod revival was a microcosm. But the last singles needed to be there.
The single didn't quite sell as was expected. The final single, Turn Away Again, which was another good song. But again, I think at that time it seemed that the record company maybe weren't behind it as much as we really wanted or really needed. And I think they just felt at the end of the day they were just sort of banging their heads against a brick wall.
I think the beginning of the end was much, much earlier. I think it was after the album. I think there was a songwriting crisis for Chris.
It's possible, because then you're into the second album syndrome. The first album is how many years you've had to put it together. It's, what you've been playing, the whole thing. It's easy. And then suddenly you've got to write an album. And that is a possibility. But I don't remember any pressure on him to make a second album. I think that they, to get to that, they would have needed to have had maybe a couple of top 30 hits.
We did some demos which would have gone to the second album, but it just didn't materialise.
I think Polydor didn't kick on when they should have done, and then the band fell apart with Billy leaving. Chris seems to write songs in fits and spurts, and it's not I think like any songwriter, it's not a continual process. You have moments of inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, I've got issues with like 3 or 4 or 5 of the songs that I think are very average, and I'm saying that I wrote them, they don't, to me, to make sense, that's the time that some do. But it's the same with any band, you're highly critical of what you did. If the chords, I always said the chords was kind of us lot just tuning up. And then, we were just tuning up learning, and then suddenly as though when someone just pulled the plug. So the only thing we had was to document ourselves was that one album. I think if we'd gone on and we would have, the second album we were doing wasn't like the first album. That was the whole point. The record company were like, well, what's this? And we were kind of moving in a different direction anyway. So by the time we got the third or fourth album, it would have been totally different.
I wasn't there at the end. They kind of shafted me before that.
On Top of the Pops twice, and you get a top 30 album, and you've got singles of the week in all the music press. You should kick on from there. You should use that as a springboard, and we didn't.
I just didn't want to be in the band anymore at that particular time for the reasons that I don't think anyone was listening to us because of what they thought we were, as opposed to the music.
I mean, mod, it's a fantastic culture. It's a fantastic look. But it became an albatross around our neck at that point because it was a dirty word. I think partly to do with the other bands who'd come along.
I can remember going to see the Chords at Wolverhampton, probably about 1980, and being aware that there were these kids in the audience with two-tone gear on, and remember thinking, maybe mod has already been left behind. And
but I was never mod. Looking good to the answer. Look at me. No, I was a pumpkin puff. You got the face. Come on, no money. Clothes were, looking sharp maybe. I mean, it was all Fred Perry's and Stay Press. We used to do the shops. Me and Terry used to do the shops. But I mean, the idea of like spending loads and loads and loads and just looking good and no. Music was more important. That end of it.
I mean, it's you look back and you go, well, you understand it, because when I was 13, 14, I wanted my bands. I wanted someone who was 5, 10 years older than me, whatever. But I wanted my music. Every generation wants their own thing, and whether the whole Chords thing or the whole mod thing, looking back, was maybe why some kid in Birmingham wanted to get into span about and Duran Duran and say, well, that's not for me. But I mean, I think we got caught in between the types of fashion, right?
I think they tried to evolve into a band that, a bit like the Kinks and the Small Faces and the Who, that reflected aspects of British life. I mean, they actually did a song called British Way of Life, which had a very sort of British seaside scene, could have been Blackpool or Margate, on the cover. And I think they tried to evolve into that, but I think possibly there wasn't really a market for that. They didn't really have a market anymore.
I think we knew November 1981, just a year after Billy had left. We played the Marquee. We did a final tour. We didn't really announce it, but there's a little clue on the back of the last single, Turn Away Again. There's a poem on there that I'd acquired. So I think the writing was on the sleeve, if not on the wall, and it was just a natural thing. It was a natural time to end it. We didn't regret it. I don't think we could have gone on. I don't think a second album would have helped.
I certainly think the band and Chris had the talent to go all the way if they could have got there. But it still comes back to even allowing for the mucking about, the taking their time to find a singer. I just don't think they had the luck. I really don't, and I think you need that.
You know, the amount of success that you get isn't, you know, directly related to the kind of quality of the kind of music that you play and how good you are. That didn't quite happen with the Chords, although they were, you know, as on the mod scene they were pretty big, but they always had the potential to go far, far, far beyond that. But you know, sadly that didn't kind of quite happen. And you know, when I look back now, I can't really see why that should have been the case.
I think that they're more than a footnote in musical history. I think they're an interesting band. They were just a bit unlucky, really, with the way things went.
All bands need a bit of good luck and stuff, you know. I mean, maybe Tomorrow should have been top 30. I don't know. I still don't understand why that wasn't. I mean, it was a number 40 or something like that in the charts. When they did Top of the Pops, that appearance alone was amazing. You know, they looked great. Don't know why the single didn't go up after that.
Well, like Maybe Tomorrow was a top 10 single in anybody's book. An absolutely stupendous kind of anthemic, you know, single.
Millstone for them, Maybe Tomorrow, because it's so good that some of their other stuff gets overlooked, and but it is sort of magnum opus. It's of its time, yet it's kind of feels contemporary as well. And as I said before, I think, you know, if something like the Manic Street Preachers did it now, people would be saying, you know, what a brilliant thing that they're tapping into these fears about the rise of fascism and so on. And I think that song, if they're remembered for nothing else, they should be remembered for that song. And I noticed it appeared on one or two compilations, including one that Mojo put out of sort of tracks from the 80s, and it seems, you know, it's not going to be forgotten, that track, which is great.
Sometimes I just get a feeling crazy, dreams inside. People hiding, wearing uniforms, screaming like that, shout your lie, pointing fingers and questions why. Can't get people when I lie. Imagination, real sound, from the streets, from the town. Sometimes I watch and wait for signs of voices and screams. The dream now is just a funny joke, and it's only just a dream. I'm not coming into what I see when I see you staring at me. A real sound from the streets, from the town. Silent footsteps, whispers on the ground. It's too late, when the underground. Cause when we saw you, showing up this time. Yes, we saw you. You were wearing the uniform. You were wearing the uniform.
I always said if it hadn't happened, what I might have regretted it all my life, and then if it did happen, I did regret a lot of it.
Yeah.
So you can't win with it, but no, it was a period of time. It was just crazy for like 2.5, 3 years, and you get, like I said, you're very, very lucky at 17, 18 to make a record, go on top of pops, play, go on tour. You can't wish for anything more, than that. And I think, I always said my dad, when he was 18, got shipped out to Africa to fight Rommel. But when I was 18, he got shipped up there and wanted to play in Leeds with the Undertones,